Yes, it's time to talk about that scene. I don't think I've ever been contacted by as many people asking if I had seen something or knew about something as when this particular scene came out. So that's really awesome. I really appreciate that people think of me in connection with Jabba and were wondering how I would react to something like this. I thought that was pretty cool. So I haven't really talked too much about The Mandalorian on the channel. It's not really my thing to do like reaction videos and so forth, but I really think it's necessary to do it in this case. So before we get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about just The Mandalorian in general. I've really enjoyed the show up until now, both seasons of it. I think I mentioned in a previous video that I was kind of fed up with the child, Baby Yoda, but it didn't really mean the character itself so much as the merchandising. It seems like half of all Star Wars merchandising or more is now the child related. So, you get a little bit fed up of that. But I love the character on the show. And even, some of the merchandise is actually pretty cool as well. Just as an aside, speaking of the child, when they first did the reveal of Grogu, the child, anyway, was completely spoiler free at that point. So I had no idea who it was going to be that they were revealing there. And I thought there was an off chance that it might actually be Rota, Jabba's son, who is in the pram that they have the baby in. Turned out not to be, of course, but ever since then, I've kind of kept an eye out for anything that could be sort of even tangentially Jabba related on the show, and there have been a few things. Just to give you a couple of examples, in Season 1, actually the first episode, we saw the Mandalorian coming to a doorway, and out came a sort of robot doorkeeper. Looks to be the same model that Jabba used on his gate, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Goodness gracious me.
Later on, we see some food vendors are selling Kowakian monkey lizards on the street. And of course, that's the same species as Salacious Crumb. It's a little disturbing to see that in a sense because we've kind of been led to believe that Salacious Crumb is, at least on some level, a sentient being. I don't know exactly to what degree that's true. Some of the expanded universe things seem to indicate that they can even talk. But in any case, that was a bit of a surprise. Almost exactly a year ago, Jon Favreau tweeted an image of a maquette of a Gamorrean guard, apparently, saying Season 2 of The Mandalorian coming fall 2020. So that gave us the idea that there would be Gamorrean guards involved in Season 2 somehow. It turned out they were wrestlers. Well, not so much wrestlers as sort of pit fighters, I suppose. The actual Gamorreans that ended up in the show itself are quite a bit different in their design. They look a lot more like the original Gamorreans, at least in terms of their outfits. These Gamorreans seem to be quite a bit more muscular, as might be expected of pit fighters. At first glance, they seem to be using the same axes as the Jabba's Palace ones, but I think actually they've been modified to produce these force waves or whatever they are, and I don't think actually the ones that Jabba's guards used would have behaved this way. It's a little bit of a weird choice in some sense, because it seems like they maybe wanted to do a death match without having any blood in it or anything, because normally if you're fighting with axes, you're going to have some blood. So that's just a quick rundown of some of the Jabba-related things that I noticed in watching the show. Obviously, there are other things, such as the return of Boba Fett, which kind of deserve their own topic, and also Jedi Luke and so forth. I will say, though, that seeing Luke Skywalker come back in his sort of pre-old man form was pretty impressive and exciting, and I'm hoping that they're going to follow that up with something else later on. But of course, we're here today to talk about one particular scene, the post-credit scene on the last episode of Season 2. Somebody had messaged me earlier saying that there was something I might be interested in this episode, but they had said that before with Boba Fett, and I wasn't really sure what they were talking about. But when we got to the credits, my son turned to me and he said, "Do you think there's a post-credits scene?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. I don't really think they've done that before on Star Wars." But sure enough, when we looked to see how much was left in the episode, there was quite a bit of time left for it to just be the credits. So I sped through them, and then when we saw this come on the screen, we both looked at each other and were like, "It's happening! It's finally happening!" So that was pretty fun. What I want to do now is take a look at this scene in some detail, look at exactly what is included, and maybe make some comparisons between the palace in this scene and how it existed in Return of the Jedi. Inside the palace, we see a couple of Gamorreans walking by. I wonder if these are just the same Gamorrean costumes that have been redressed for Jabba's palace, but they are wearing the Jabba's palace uniforms. I do think the hand on this one in the foreground looks a little strange, like the costume isn't fitting properly, but whatever. And here we have the big reveal. Bib Fortuna is alive and well and sitting on Jabba's throne, which I'm sure Jabba would be just thrilled about. It's not revealed in Return of the Jedi what happens to Bib Fortuna, although I think a lot of people probably just assume that he died when the barge exploded. But in some of the expanded universe stories, they have him attempting to take over after Jabba's death and failing and ending up as a brain spider, so-called, having his brain removed and put inside a robotic Bomar monk. But apparently neither of those things is what actually happened. So if we take a second to think about the implications of this, he managed to not only survive the sail barge explosion, but he came back and apparently has taken over as head of Jabba's criminal organization. You can see he's got his own little throne on top of the throne with some Rancor heads there on the arms, which I thought was an interesting touch. He's also gained quite a bit of weight, which makes me think, between him being on the throne and having gained this weight, that he's really trying to emulate Jabba in some sense. You may also notice that he's holding the staff that the Kenner figure came with. Now, that staff was never used in the movies, so it's really cool to see him finally using it in something official like this. We can also see things like the meat rotisserie in the background and those little red, I don't know what those are, windows. The way everything looks is pretty much spot on to the way it looked in Return of the Jedi. And that's really impressive because they had to recreate the palace entirely from scratch. The Mandalorian, if you know anything about its production, makes extensive use of a very advanced kind of digital projection unit called the Volume, which allows them to project things in the background on the walls and ceiling and so forth and make it look like they're outside, even though they're actually just on a soundstage. But from what I understand, this Jabba's palace scene was not able to use that technology just because of the way the palace is laid out. So they actually did create this in person, which I thought was really cool. It'd be something I'd like to visit someday if they still have it. I'm hoping that they're going to keep it around for use in other scenes later on. Let's rewind just a little bit and look at the characters that are appearing in this scene. On the left, we have a Twi'lek dancer who is chained to the throne. Above her is a Weequay. And then another guard talking to Bib Fortuna appears to be a Nikto. Behind that Nikto, I believe, is another Weequay. Then we have a Gran, which may or may not be Ree-Yees from Return of the Jedi. And he's talking to someone who appears to be Rystal Sant, who is one of the sort of new dancers that they added in the Return of the Jedi Special Edition. And finally, on the right-hand side, we have a Quarren, who is the same race as Tessek, or Squidhead, from Return of the Jedi, although it's not really clear who he's supposed to be here. So we really only get a few seconds to see Bib in his role as the head of the crime family, sitting on his throne before Fennec appears and starts blasting. Yes, you did hear that correctly. Bib Fortuna said the infamous word McClunky, which they added to the Han versus Greedo scene in A New Hope. That is supposed to mean this will be the end of you, but doesn't really make sense in this context to me for Bib to be saying that to one of his guards. It seems like he's saying, take care of this or kill them or something like that. But in any case, it's kind of an interesting throwback to that scene. Just to rewind a couple seconds, here we can see a couple of other characters that we couldn't see from the previous angle. On the left-hand side, there's what appears to be another Twi'lek, because of the Leku, we can see the head tentacles. And also there appears to be a Jawa that is running away sort of through the archway there. It might look like she's just come in here and slaughtered everyone, but I think she's actually just targeted the ones who had weapons and let everyone else go. So, for example, Rystal and Ree-Yees, or whoever that is, appear to have just slipped out the back, and that makes some sense because Boba Fett and Rystal and maybe some other of the characters as well, knew each other from their time in the palace. I think it's worth taking a second to just look at the palace as it exists here. It's a little difficult to make comparisons with this and the palace from Return of the Jedi because we don't have the same exact camera angles, and also the palace in Return of the Jedi was a lot more dimly lit. But you can definitely see a lot of the same elements. For example, we have these two panels on the wall, which I guess are supposed to be some sort of hologames panel. That was where the droid BG-J38 was stationed in most of the Return of the Jedi scenes. You can see him here on the right behind Ula, and you can also see that these panels are quite a bit more widely spaced than they are in The Mandalorian, even from other angles. They appear to be a little bit closer together, which is kind of interesting. We have, of course, the stairway and archway that basically everyone uses to enter the throne room. We have the wind chimes, which Leia bumped her head into when she was trying to sneak into the throne room. By the way, hanging from each of those wind chimes is a small carved hut shape. You may not be able to tell, but that's actually what it is. So getting back to the normal progression of the episode, we finally get to see Boba Fett climbing down the stairs, and Bib Fortuna seeing him there and saying to himself, "Oh dear." By the way, the actor who plays Bib Fortuna here is Matthew Wood, who is not only a sound editor for The Mandalorian and other shows, he is the guy who played Bib Fortuna in The Phantom Menace back more than 20 years ago, which I think is a really cool sort of Easter egg. I think it's kind of interesting to think about Boba Fett's motivation here. He has Fennec come in and take care of all the guards, but leave Bib Fortuna alone and have him come in and see him there, right? And then he kills him. I think it seems like there was some bad blood between Bib and Boba there, and he really wanted to let him know who was coming to get him and who was replacing him. And as the end title here indicates, there's going to be a new series, apparently a relatively short series called The Book of Boba Fett, which is separate from The Mandalorian, but will be coming before Mandalorian Season 3, apparently. Naturally, this brings up a lot of questions about what's going to be happening in that series. Is Boba Fett actually essentially taking over Jabba's position after taking it from Bib? That's a really interesting development. I don't know if that's exactly the case. They haven't really positioned Boba Fett as being a criminal per se. He's more of a bounty hunter and someone who's a bit of an outlaw, but not necessarily a straight-up criminal. So I'm interested to see where they're going to take this. Well, I think I've spent long enough analyzing this 2.5-minute scene, so I think I'm going to end it here, but I'd be interested to hear what you guys thought of this, and if you have any questions or thoughts about how everything is going to play out in the future, and let me know if you might like to see more videos of this type as well. This video was made possible with the help of my patrons, including these Palace VIPs, and especially Angelica Brady. Thank you very much for your support. If you'd like to help support me on Patreon, you can look at the link in the video description. You can get a variety of benefits, including early videos and behind-the-scenes posts, as well as getting your name in the end of my videos. So do be sure to check it out. Thanks very much for watching.